Well, quite a jubilant scene there. These are the initial scenes of joy in Gaza City after the truce went into effect early on Friday. The UN Secretary General also welcomed the agreement and called on all parties to abide by it. Egypt took the lead in brokering the ceasefire, which appears to be holding up for now. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has held a phone conversation with his Israeli counterpart and announced plans to travel to the Middle East in coming days to meet with Israeli, Palestinian and regional counterparts.
It's a diplomatic victory for the Egyptian administration led by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to reach this ceasefire agreement. Egypt has been put at the front line of brokering this deal between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Egypt will proceed by sending 2 security delegations, one in Gaza and one in Israel, to follow up on the implementation of this ceasefire agreement and maintains that it stays calm until another round of negotiations could finally maintain the ceasefire for a longer term. Now, in talks with between the Egyptian president and President Joe Biden on the night of reaching the ceasefire, he stressed that there must be further actions in reviving the peace process between the Palestinians and the Israelis. This is the only way Egypt believes that such atrocities will be avoided in the future, and therefore Egypt wants to use this diplomatic achievement to push forward and revive the Palestinian peace talks. From there forward, there will be international collaboration between international powers, the United Nations, the EU, the African Union, and the Arab League as well, to try to see how talks can resume between both sides and how the Palestinians can finally move forward with the general elections, something that Egypt and the Arab world have been looking forward to, so that there will be an accepted government by all Palestinian factions, and that government will be the representative of all Palestinians in future talks. So this is just the beginning of a plan that Egypt aims and hopes would lead to having direct talks between the Palestinians and Israelis, and hopefully once again talk about peace. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
The Egypt brokered agreement followed mounting international pressure to stop fighting there, with nearly 100 nations debating the issue at the UN General Assembly. Lilling Tan has more from New York.
4 times the United Nations Security Council met on the latest Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and 4 times it failed to agree on a statement calling for a ceasefire. Frustrated by the lack of council action amid rising civilian casualties, several countries took the matter to the UN's largest body, the General Assembly, where we heard resounding calls for a ceasefire.
The fighting must stop immediately. I appeal to all parties to cease hostilities now, and I reiterate my call on all sides for an immediate ceasefire.
China condemns all violence against civilians, opposes all violence, inciting rhetoric, and calls for the immediate end of hostilities and violence. Israel, in particular, should exercise restraint.
But just hours before an agreement was reached between Israel and Hamas, the prospect of an immediate ceasefire seemed out of reach. Within the UN walls and among an international community that has predominantly backed the Palestinian cause against Israeli aggression, Muslim nations condemned what they saw as Israel's disproportionate use of force, while Israel lashed back at Hamas, the Palestinians, and the international community.
What would you do if it was you? If it was your civilians under fire? If it was your family running to the bomb shelters? How would you want the international community to respond?
Israel would ask you, what would you have done if missiles were targeting your cities? But Israel forgets that its occupation is the root cause of the violence.
This General Assembly was convened to press for a ceasefire and a longer-term solution to the conflict. The Assembly does not carry the same kind of legal weight that the Security Council does, but at nearly 13 times the size of the Security Council, it is more representative of the world's nations and can exert international pressure in a way that the Security Council cannot on Israel and its longtime ally, the United States.
In his most recent call with Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday, President Biden communicated that we continue to stand by Israel's right to defend itself, that we believe Israel is now in a position to begin winding down the conflict, and we expect a significant de-escalation to begin.
The New York Times reported that President Biden also warned the Israeli Prime Minister that he could only hold off growing international pressure for so long. And with this ceasefire agreement, it appears that international pressure may have accomplished something. Li Lingtan, CGTN, New York.
For more insight into that, let's cross live to Professor Wang Jing in Xi'an. He's a Middle Eastern studies expert. So, Professor, the latest ceasefire is at least a relief for the people in Palestine after more than a week of heavy fighting there. But are you worried this ceasefire could only be a temporary one?
If we look at from the very longer historical background, it will be temporary, because actually it is only the truce, or it is only the suspension of the long-term the conflict and the confrontation between Israel and the Palestinians. That's for sure, because this is only very temporary and very short-term in the very period. If we look at from the overall the conflict between the two sides, I mean the Jews and the Palestinians in this piece of land. So actually, it will be effective for both sides, Hamas and Israel, to suspend their military actions against each other and to help pacify the tension what is happening right now in this land. But we have to know that it cannot be the end of the hostilities between the two peoples. It cannot be the end of the very hatred and also the distrust between the two sides. So that's why we say, okay, the mediation from Egypt and also the efforts from international society is very, very timely. It's very, very good. But what we have to do is to do more to facilitate the peace process restart, and to help the two sides to sit down, to find a way together to solve the the conflict that has been lasted for nearly a century.
Now, having said that, Professor, let me refer you to remarks from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Only 2 days ago, he vowed to continue the offensive against Gaza. So are you saying that this truce, this ceasefire right now is not a change of heart from the Israeli side?
I think it cannot change the hearts both Israelis and also the Palestinians, because from both its perspectives, this ceasefire is not the end of the conflict. This ceasefire cannot solve all the problems, because both sides do not trust the other side, and both sides have their own plans to how to settle the Israeli and Palestinian conflict issue. So I think that's why as we stress, we need the international efforts, and we need more assistance from international society to facilitate the negotiations and talks from the both sides. Because without direct talks, without direct communications, without the international efforts, and no peace can be really achieved to the two sides in this piece of land that has been suffered by the nearly 1 century, the hatred, hostilities, and confrontations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wang Jing in Xi'an. Meanwhile, Gaza's Ministry of Economy reported significant damage to the industrial sector amid the deadly conflict. Noor Harazin reports from Gaza.
Business owners in the Gaza Strip have joined a press conference held by the Palestinian Ministry of National Economy to express anger over the latest Israeli attacks on factories and companies in Gaza. Dr. Raed Al-Jazzar, the ministry's director of general industry, said Israel aims to destroy Gaza's infrastructure, therefore destroying the local development process in the Strip. Such a move would endanger the local economy, as 30% of Gaza's goods are provided by local factories.
Damage done to our industrial sector has amounted to about $30 million so far. We cannot count all the damage done to the factories because our engineers and technicians are not able to reach all industrial facilities that have been targeted. There are factories that have been badly destroyed, and it may take months, perhaps years, to return to normal production.
Within a week of the military operation, Israeli aircrafts have bombed many shops and factories. The targeting of Gaza's weak industrial sector will cause a major economic crisis, beginning with unemployment in Gaza, which exceeded 45% before the beginning of the conflict.
We were surprised to receive a call from the Israeli army informing us that they would target our factory. This place is the only source of livelihood for myself and for more than 30 other workers here. I do not know why they decided to bomb our factory and what damage our factory has caused to Israel. It is our workplace. We earn a living here.
On Monday, Israeli warplanes destroyed Masharaq, Gaza's largest advertising company. Masharaq was home to a large number of Palestinian artists, creators, and young talents.
Losses sustained after our company was bombed were very large, estimated at more than $2 million. We lost everything in the company's warehouses, in addition to all our printing machines. The company's studios were also destroyed. We have more than 60 employees working here, and now all of them are out of work because of this bombing. They've lost their livelihoods.
Economists say Gaza's economy will take years to recover from the impacts of the devastating airstrikes, which as of Thursday have left thousands of homes, factories, as well as thousands of acres of farmland in ruins by Israeli tank shelling and airstrikes. Nur Harazin, CGTN, Gaza.